This is Harry Judd for Boxing Social in association with Betfred. I am in Phoenix for Jake Paul Anderson Silva. Was hoping that Dan would make the trip, but unfortunately had to try and get him on a Zoom. But first of all, Dan, Rafael, how are we, sir?
I'm doing great. I mean, you're in Phoenix, but I'll be watching that fight on TV tonight. I thought
Lovely.
about making that. I thought about making
Well,
that trip, and it just didn't. There was so much other stuff going on tonight, also, that it just, for a variety of reasons, as well as non-boxing related reasons, it didn't make sense to be there for me.
I'll be honest, it's been good to get out of the English cold weather, get into a nice bit of heat here. I am really, really loving the weather, first of all, and loving the food as well, Dan, I must say, loving the food. But yeah, let's first of all kick off. The fight is set to commence this evening in the US. Just get your thoughts. First of all, is the interest still in this fight? It's been spoken about as much as it was previously in the build-up?
I mean, to me anyway, it seems like the interest is there from the standpoint that if you have any remote interest in Jake Paul's career, which certainly eliminates a lot of boxing fans, but there are a lot of boxing fans and frankly non-boxing fans who are interested, that it's the most intriguing fight that he has had so far, in my view, because Anderson Silva is, in my mind, a totally different level of opponent compared to the other guys that he has faced so far. It's no knock on those other fighters, but Anderson Silva is one of the all-time greats in combat sports. And even though he's not a full-time boxer for the bulk of his career, he's been training very seriously in it over the last couple of years. He's had 4 professional fights. He has a victory against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Now, that may not be as worthwhile today as it may have been a few years ago, but that's still a whole different ballgame compared to the types of guys that Jake has faced so far. So, people look at Jake Paul, they see a guy that's being in these big events, and well, he's not fighting anybody, but he shouldn't be fighting anybody when you're in the formative stages of your career. It's not his fault that people want to see him fight and are willing to pay for pay-per-views and tickets and that sort of thing. So he's out there learning the sport as he's also been an attraction. If he was not Jake Paul and just a regular guy, he'd be fighting, 4 and 6 and 8 rounders on undercards, making a fraction of the money, fighting guys you never heard of. But he has a popularity level, and now he's fighting Anderson Silva. So, we'll see if he bit off more than he can chew.
It is a massive name, huge name. That's an understatement. A huge, huge name within combat sports. But there is an argument that he is obviously past his best. He's 47 years of age, Dan. Is it strategic for Jake Paul to pick such a huge name? But at this age, obviously Jake's the favorite in this fight.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously that has to play into it. But you cannot. Age is. I don't want to be cliche, but it's a number. And if you look at Anderson Silva in his boxing matches against Chavez, and not that he was facing a top boxer when he fought Tito Ortiz, who was a fellow former UFC champion, he dusted him with one punch in 81 seconds. So those are his 2 more recent boxing matches, and he's on the same level record-wise in boxing as Jake is. So, I'm interested. I mean, it's not, I don't take it as big time boxing from the standpoint of it's for a world title or it has implications on a pound for pound list or something along those lines. But as a diversion, as something I'm interested to watch, I'm in.
What do you make of the bet between the two at the press conference? Obviously, Jake saying if Anderson wins, he gets to fight Jake in an MMA competition, and then Jake's bet that if he wins, he sets up this UFC commission to help get better healthcare for UFC fighters. What did you make of that? Is that actually a possibility, or is that just smoke and mirrors?
Who knows if they'll actually follow through? I mean, but Jake has made it a habit, it seems, in his fights. There's always some sort of pre-fight wager or talk of a pre-fight wager, whether they actually follow through or not. I think there was the one, then he bet, maybe it was Eddie Hearn $1 million on the outcome of the Serrano and Katie Taylor fight. I don't think they ever ended up paying up in some respects. So, listen, if that happens and they're able to set up something to help out the UFC fighters, good for them. And if he does end up taking on Anderson Silva in some kind of combat, but not boxing, whether it's kickboxing or MMA or something, I guess I'll be interested in that too. But I take it more as pre-fight hype than anything that I should take seriously.
Is it perhaps 2 fingers up to Dana White? Would it be that sort of way as well?
Well, anybody that follows Jake at all knows that he and Dana White are not exactly best buddies, that they'll knock each other at any given moment. and so that's that relationship. I mean, yeah, of course, he doesn't like Dana. Dana doesn't like Jake, and maybe the big fight down the road is Dana versus Jake. That's a joke, by the way. I don't want to see that in a headline.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it has been a great experience out in Phoenix already this week. But yeah, there are talks between the Showtime team that this will be a sellout. They are expecting huge pay-per-view buys. Do you think those both will come to fruition?
I mean, I can't speak to whether it's a sellout. I mean, but I would suspect there'll be a very good crowd at that event. And in terms of pay per view, it's not going to be on the level of the older days when big fights could do 1 million buys and that sort of stuff. But relative to the types of pay per view numbers that are coming in these days for good fights, but not necessarily say Fury Wilder caliber fights. This fight should do in the low six figures. There is interest. I mean, I see it on my own social media where obviously I interact with a lot of diehard fans, but a lot of those diehard fans either are interested or they're interested in a negative way. It reminds me of sort of like the old, I mean, not to date myself, I covered a lot of Nassim Hamed fights when I first started out. And everybody you would talk to when there was a Nassim Hamed fight coming up, they all wanted to watch it, but half the people wanted to see him win and kick some ass, and other people wanted to see him lose and get his ass kicked. And Jake Paul sort of engenders that same kind of feeling from a lot of fans. There are some that like watching him, that applaud what he's doing, that respect him, that think he's trying to just be a guy to try to make a go of it, and other people think that he's sort of invading a place where he doesn't belong, where he shouldn't be allowed to fight in a main event, even though it's not his fault that he draws. Because if you can sell, you can be in a main event, and they want to see him lose. So there's gonna be a lot of people that are gonna buy a pay-per-view who are gonna be looking to watch him get beaten. But from Jake Paul's point of view, and I've heard other fighters say this, Floyd Mayweather used to say this all the time. If you want me to win, if you want me to lose, that's great. Just buy the pay-per-view. Either way.
What do you make of the rumors or speculation? I mean, Anderson Silva's come back multiple times, said he misspoke, or he then said it was a joke. Now it's back to he misspoke again. The rumors and the stuff that have been circulating around him being knocked out. He said, no, knocked down in sparring. We've heard he's been knocked out. What did you make of that that's been going on?
I mean, I've been following that a little bit. And first of all, it's not exactly a trade secret that professional fighters at the highest level to the lowest level, when they spar and prepare for fights, there are knockouts that do happen. It's not an ideal situation, obviously, but it does happen. And it's certainly not a good thing. As far as what happened with Anderson Silva, I mean, you and me and other than his people, we were not in the gym. So we have no idea if he's being for real and he did get knocked out. There is the possibility, of course, he claims that he misspoke. English is not his first language. The interview, my understanding, was conducted in Spanish and appeared on an English language website. So I have no idea. I mean, I hope it's not true. And if it is, from everything I have heard, the folks in Arizona, the commission people, they did another MRI. They checked him out. They gave him a medical just to be sure about things. And by all accounts, he's clear and good to go. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. But there's no evidence that suggests that he's in any way more at risk going into this fight than any other fighter. And that's, I think, people have to understand, that's the main job of a regulator and the medical personnel. Is we all know that combat sports are dangerous, but when you examine a fighter and you determine whether he is fit or she is fit to perform in the event, is that person at any greater risk than another fighter? And they have determined that in case of Anderson Silva against Jake Paul, the answer is no. So we'll see the fight tonight.
Yeah, honestly, my heart was going. The fact I was out here for that, thinking, oh, not another one. If this one get cancelled as well, I'm just ending 2022 right there. But how much respect will Jake get if he beats Anderson Silva?
I think it's a big deal if he beats Anderson Silva. It doesn't, like I said earlier, it doesn't make him a pound for pound guy. It doesn't make him a world champion. But it's one thing to beat a Tyron Woodley. It's one thing to beat a Ben Askren or a basketball player, Nate Robinson, or a fellow social media influencer like Gibb. It's a different level to beat an Anderson Silva. And I don't care if he's 47 years old. The guy has known and done more than most combat athletes could ever dream of. Now, granted, like 99% of it has not been in boxing, but he's a phenomenal athlete. He's a freak of nature. He's one of the most decorated combat fighters of all time. And in terms of his boxing training, he's done well over the last, couple of years training and having the two bouts that he had. And again, maybe some people overrate the victory against Chavez, but basically a novice boxer beat Chavez cleanly, and that's a good win. And if Jake can beat him, he should get credit. I'm not going to knock him if he gets to win. Again, doesn't make him a great fighter, but it shows you, at least to me, that he is a person that can continue to possibly develop. One thing about Jake Paul, whether you like him or you don't, he carries great punching power in his right hand, and he works hard. So those are two excellent qualities to have if you're trying to build a foundation of a career. And when I did an interview with Jake for the podcast I work on a couple of days ago, and I asked him about whatever happens on Saturday, are you in boxing for the long haul? In my mind, I asked him about this because his brother Logan Paul has dabbled in boxing, but is now has a career going and has been popular and done very well in world wrestling entertainment, WWE. So I asked him, I said, are you in boxing for the long haul, or might we see Jake Paul join brother Logan and try to make a run at the tag team titles in WWE? And he said he's in boxing for the long haul. He didn't discount the prospect of maybe trying his hand at WWE at some point. Plenty of boxers and other athletes have gone into that and done it briefly. Tyson Fury's done it. Mike Tyson did it years ago and then come back to boxing. So he says he's in boxing for the long haul. And this is another building block on his career if he can beat Anderson Silva. And if he loses against Anderson Silva, I don't expect Jake's going to throw in the towel and say, I'm done, I'm quitting boxing. He took a loss to a great, and presumably he'll learn from that experience and gather himself and get back to the drawing board.
Yeah, I must say, I obviously was privileged to attend the open workout on Wednesday evening, and the diversity of the audience that participated, that attended, and I guess, I spoke to Espinosa about this as well, the range of people that it brings now to boxing, I think it's incredible. So, like you said, a lot of die-hard fans that are always and will always be against Jake Paul coming into boxing, but I do think there's an overwhelming positivity with this, Dan.
I have to be honest with you. I don't get the negativity. Who, like, his entrance into boxing, who does that hurt? You don't have to buy the pay-per-view if you don't want to. That's fine. There are people that say, I've heard accusations, read things, people have messaged me about it. Well, he's taken away the spotlight from these other young fighters or these other champions and that sort of stuff. And I just don't buy that, because he's not taking the spotlight from anybody. Those fighters can find the spotlight on their own, but it's not his fault that, to give the people what they want. People are interested in Jake's career. Again, some want to see him win, some want to see him lose, but there's a lot of people watching. But that does not take away from anybody else. It's not an either or proposition. It's not just if Jake Paul is on pay-per-view, XYZ can't be on pay-per-view. It is not that type of situation. If there was some other young fighter or champion that also had a popularity level that could draw the kind of crowds and attention that Jake does, they too would be fighting in those types of events. So the hate for Jake to make a rhyme, I just don't get. I respect him, what he's doing in boxing. I have no problem with it, and I frankly am entertained by it.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's many options that Jake can go in, win or lose. One option that became most apparent of this week because of this man's appearance all of fight week has been Nate Diaz. He put two fingers up to Jake Paul whilst the film was going on in the background. Just talk about how big that fight would be in terms of the production, the fight itself, Dan.
Well, I mean, look, he's another big name from the UFC world, and obviously if he beats Anderson Silva, Jake does, and there's the movement to make a Nate Diaz fight, it will be another sort of big deal kind of event. Now, it's going to get to a certain point where, you're going to start to run out of these UFC legends that are going to try their hand at boxing. Now, people have followed what Jake's been doing the last number of months, going back to last year. He has been trying to fight a full-time boxer because that's been the rap on him against a lot of people, from a lot of people where, but he tried to fight Tommy Fury. We know what happened there twice. He tried to fight Hasim Rahman Jr. We know what happened there. Those guys were both full-time undefeated boxers. It wasn't his fault that those fights did not take place in any way. So here he goes with Anderson Silva, which is frankly probably a bigger fight commercially than the Tommy Fury fight or the Hasim Rahman fight. So, if he fights Nate Diaz, that's cool. I guess people will gravitate to that the way they have maybe to the Silva fight. But at some point, he's going to have to fight a real boxer if he wants to continue that development. And my impression from talking to Jake and also hearing his comments is that he does want to fight a real boxer, and he's sort of resigned to the group of people that will never accept him, will always hate on him, et cetera. He made the joke. He says, if I could cure cancer, they would still hate me. If he did something miraculous, people would find a way to just get down on him. So he just put, you know, he tries to ignore that, I guess, and move on with his life and his career. It's you know, he's the one that's got to get in the ring and do the work.
You said Anderson Silva fight is more commercially valuable than Tommy Fury. Um, to me, as a Brit, I just don't buy that. There's
Well,
no. Go on.
I buy that 100% because Tommy Fury, he may have an audience in the UK, and that's cool. And I probably agree with you. He probably does have an audience there. But in America, Tommy Fury might as well be Tommy Smith. Nobody knows who he is here, and nobody cares who he is here. And Anderson Silva, even if you're not a diehard MMA fan, if you're just like a sports fan or a boxing fan that doesn't really follow MMA or UFC, you know, I mean, I'm not the biggest MMA guy in the world. I don't follow it on a daily basis, but you got to be living under a rock if you don't know who Anderson Silva is.
Yeah.
And Tommy Fury is just an unknown guy. And it's not, I'm not knocking Tommy Fury. It's just nobody knows him. So yeah, in Britain, it would be a big fight, I guess. But in the United States, it means absolutely nothing.
He still wants that fight, though. I saw he did a piece with the Daily Mirror a few days ago, and I asked Jake this during the open workout that he's letting responsibility in terms of he's letting the Frank Warren team try to make the fight with Tommy Fury on his behalf, meaning that he told me he's sick and tired of them wasting his money. Told me that his brother, his dad, don't want him to give Tommy Fury another chance. So it's still a fight that he wants.
I mean, if he wants to fight, that's fine, but you can. It takes two to get in the ring, and Tommy Fury, for whatever his reasons are, has wasted a lot of time and other people's money trying to make a fight that I don't believe he really ever had any intention of taking. We'll see if they go and revisit that at some point. I guess it's possible. I don't really understand what the, you know, there's a lot of fighters out there who are professional boxers who are undefeated. And, you know, Tommy Fury has the benefit of that last name, I suppose, but it's not like he's done anything that makes him some great challenge for Jake Paul in my mind. So if they make the fight, fine. If they don't, trust me, life goes on.
Obviously want your opinion, other things within boxing. Spence, Crawford, first of all, that's, again, I just see Sai there. Just talked about how disappointed you were once again that fight wasn't made.
I think I would speak, I put it like this. I don't make it a habit of speaking for boxing fans because I'm one of many. But I think in this particular case, my words would probably echo the sentiment of basically every boxing fan, is just extreme disappointment that this fight is not happening. Everybody knows it's the biggest fight in that division or in and around that division. These are both great championship level fighters. They're both probable Hall of Famers down the road. They are both exciting fighters to watch. And there's a point where the rest of the division has basically been cleaned out, mostly by Spence, not by Crawford, not for a lack of trying. He just has not been able to get the bigger welterweight fights other than the great victory he had against Sean Porter at the end of last year. But they have all the belts. They both have undefeated records. They've been calling each other out for like the last, I don't even know how many years, it's got to be 3 years or so. And it's a fight that we all want to see. And we get teased and teased and teased. And it finally felt like, okay, there's no impediments to making the match. There's no promotional issues because Crawford is a free agent. There's no broadcast issues because, again, Crawford was a free agent. They were involved in negotiations. They were getting to the point where they had dates set aside. They were already talking about undercard situations, and it was just a matter of getting it done. But, you know, if you get it 99.9% done, it ain't done until you get that last 0.1%. And they could not get to the level where both sides were comfortable with whatever the deal in front of them both were. And for Terrence Crawford's reasons, he elected to take another offer and go a different direction. And it's, you know, he said, what's my feeling? And again, my feeling, and I think most boxing fans, I'm sure yours also, is just extreme disappointment that is not going to happen, because we deserve this fight. And I've said this before, Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence deserve this fight. You know, what we want, that's one thing, but the fighters deserve to have this kind of legacy making fight that will be remembered on their records and in their however long their careers go. This is that fight. This is the one. You know, Errol Spence has said to me in the past in interviews that he would not want to leave the welterweight division and move up to junior middleweight before he fought Crawford, because this was the legacy fight for him. He knows it, and Crawford knows it also. They have to fight each other, and if they don't, it's going to be a disappointment. But I'll tell you one thing, Harry, we'll get over it. But they'll always be remembered for the fact that they didn't fight each other. And it's unfortunate when a boxer is remembered more for the fights that he didn't have than the fights that he did have. And so for all the great wins that Errol Spence has had, he's had a lot of good victories. People will think about him, oh, yeah, he never got that fight with Crawford. And the same with Crawford. Crawford, he won titles in 3 weight classes and he had a good career. He was undisputed at 140. But he never fought Spence.
Mm.
How horrible would that be to go through the rest of your career and your Hall of Fame days, etc., when you're remembered more for the fight that you didn't have than the ones that you did have? And I hope that they understand that, because there's a lot of money for them to both made. It's not like we're asking them to fight each other for free.
Mm.
Sometimes you have to learn how to say yes. And Terrence Crawford, I don't think, has learned that just yet.
You said that the broadcasting with this fight isn't an issue. To my knowledge, the broadcasting for Garcia and Gervonta Davis is the only issue, really, isn't it? At the moment, the reason why that fight hasn't been confirmed. Garcia, obviously, with DAZN, etc. Again, speaking with Showtime and people in Phoenix at the moment, everyone's confident that that fight will happen, but
I'm not confident that happens. I mean, you get to a certain point where you can get everything done and agreed to, but none of it makes a difference unless you come up with how are you going to deliver it to the public. And if you can't get on the same page in terms of the broadcast involved with the fight, then at least for the time being, that fight is not going to happen. So both sides are dug in, apparently. I can't really blame either side. I mean, Showtime, again, people don't like to hear it, but they've spent millions of dollars supporting the career of Gervonta Davis. They've helped make him into a pay-per-view level fighter against whoever he fights, and they deserve to be involved in the big fight for him. And similar in the case of Ryan Garcia, who's not yet been a pay-per-view attraction because he just hasn't had a pay-per-view fight. So we don't know what his performance can be on pay-per-view, but DAZN has invested a lot of money and time in supporting his career. And if you ask anybody at DAZN and they talk to you off the record or, behind the scenes or whatever, they'll tell you that other than Canelo Alvarez, who now is a pay-per-view fighter on DAZN, the biggest driver of subscriptions on DAZN in terms of boxing by far and away is Ryan Garcia. So neither side is going to let the other guy go to the other broadcaster. But this is a lot different than the days when HBO and Showtime worked together on fights like Mike Tyson, Lennox Lewis many years ago. A little more recently, between Mayweather and Pacquiao, because both sides brought something to the table in terms of their fighter and their platform. Showtime and HBO were the two big ones. Showtime was always the smaller network than HBO, but they weren't that far apart. And also, they had Mayweather and they had Tyson. They were the two bigger names, but HBO had Pacquiao, who was maybe a half step below Pacquiao, and they had Lennox Lewis, who was the champion. So they needed each other. In this case, first of all, it's not nearly the level of a fight as those two fights, or even in the case of Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, who had opposite broadcasters in terms of ESPN and Fox working together. Again, those were much bigger fights. This fight is a big fight, but it's not nearly the level of either Fury, Wilder 2 and 3, or of those two other big ones I mentioned. And so Showtime's perspective is, why are we going to go work with DAZN, which, unlike in the HBO Showtime days when they were sort of on a similar level, DAZN is still kind of a fledgling type of situation in sports broadcasting. People don't really know DAZN in the United States. I mean, we boxing fans that have it, and some other folks that might buy it for some of the other sports that I do, but it's not a mainstream product, at least not yet. It's no knock on them. They just haven't been around that long. So the people don't, been around since 2018. They're not really known. And so from the standpoint of Showtime, we have a fight that's not a mega fight on the level of a Lewis Tyson or a Mayweather Pacquiao or a Fury Wilder. Nobody knows who they are. So they don't think they bring anything to the table in terms of pay-per-view because they're not experienced in pay-per-view. And so Showtime's like, why am I going to mess around with these guys? And from DAZN's point of view, they're trying to get in the picture. They're trying to build themselves. And if they can build themselves by attaching themselves to a big event like this, where, we're working with Showtime, a well-respected boxing platform, that's good for their bottom line also. This is not, some people make the mistake thinking it's strictly about the money that a Showtime would receive from being involved in this event, or what DAZN would receive from being involved in the event. My point on that is, that's, any time you can bring money to your bottom line, it's a good thing. But I think in terms of DAZN, it's more about getting their word out, getting their name out, letting people know that they exist, letting them know who we are, that we're a partner in this big event, and let people know that you can come to our platform and watch, a lot of good combat sports and other things. So Showtime is not interested in helping put a potential competitor in a better position in the marketplace. They also don't think they bring anything to the table in terms of production or promotion or marketing or anything like that. And they believe, and rightly so at this moment, in terms of pay-per-view, they have the A side. I hate to use that A and B side, but as popular as Ryan is, he has no track record of pay-per-view. And Gervonta Tank Davis has a record of pay-per-view that has so far been successful relative to today's pay-per-view receipts. He did more for fighting Rolly Romero, a fighter that nobody really knows, than Deontay Wilder, a top heavyweight, former champion, just did against Robert Helenius. So I get both sides, and until somebody decides to give in, there's not going to be a fight.
It's frustrating.
A little long-winded, but that's the explanation.
Yeah, but I totally agree. It's becoming, again, even you've been around in boxing for many, many years, and it's becoming even more frustrating time and time again. We are blessed with having 24/7 content and more fights and fight weekends, etc. But none of the big fights are being made purely because of the broadcasting. How damaging is it becoming for the sport, this?
Well, it's not only broadcasting situations that sometimes hold back these big fights. There's nothing holding back making a fight between Crawford and Spence. It's not a broadcasting situation. And frankly, it's not even really a broadcasting situation that was holding back Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, for example, because they had apparently agreed to whatever scenarios they needed to agree to make it a combined thing between BT Sport in the UK and DAZN in the UK and ESPN and DAZN in the United States. So they were able to overcome those issues. It's like I put out a tweet the other day. We thought we were getting Joshua versus Fury. We thought we were going to get this fight between Crawford and Spence. I mean, there's lots of popular good fights that we're going to be getting, and we're not getting it. So we're going to get Crawford against Avanesian. We're going to get other fights. We're getting Fury versus Chisora 3. We're getting. They just announced DAZN a couple yesterday. Jaime Munguia fighting a guy like I remember the guy's name at this point. If you can put on a DAZN, HBO, or a Showtime, PBC, if you can put on a main event caliber fight with an opponent that I've never heard of, that's hard to do. I've heard of pretty much everybody. I'm just saying, like, if you're putting on a main event and I never heard of the opponent, you got a problem. And that's exactly what DAZN and Golden Boy did. They're putting on a Jaime Munguia fight with an opponent that I've never heard of. And it's about the 7th complete nobody in a row that Jaime Munguia is fighting. So my point that was, here we're promised all these interesting fights, and we're getting these instead. Yay boxing. Boxing as a entity, as a sport overall, and I know it's not one centralized group, but it's all these folks that put on these fights, the so-called caretakers of the sport, are doing a horrible job right now.
Yeah, we could see Jake Paul being the biggest pay-per-view of the year. We could see that tonight. That could be.
I don't know about that.
It could be an outcome. It's what's been spoken about.
Listen, you haven't been around as long as I have. Promoters will always tell you that they're going to have the biggest pay-per-view of the year. And I think that the Jake Paul Anderson Silva pay-per-view will be successful. But even though the Canelo Alvarez Bivol fight earlier in the year maybe didn't do as well as people thought it would have done, and maybe the Triple G third fight didn't do as well as people hoped it would do, I'm pretty sure that those two fights will exceed whatever Anderson Silva and Jake Paul do on pay-per-view. So just take a deep breath when the promoters tell you how much pay-per-view they're going to do. Please.
I'll take that with those comments, but let's move on quickly. Back in the UK, the Conor Benn situation has developed even more. We now know of another positive reading in July 2022 for Conor Benn. He has relinquished his license. We have spoken about this multiple times. We are thankful for that. But with the current situation with Conor Benn, what are your feelings? Why would he relinquish his license? And also the mentions of contamination. Someone, for you, you're very, very knowledgeable about this subject. Is that actually a possibility as well?
I mean, I suppose contamination is a possibility in any situation. I mean, there are supplements that have been tainted. It's not completely an alien concept. But I believe they're just throwing anything against the wall to see what sticks, to bring up contamination. They've presented no evidence of that. They haven't discussed that in any detail. They haven't said what sort of things he was taking, because athletes are going to take things that are legal, supplement things and, whatever for nutrition, that type of stuff. And they haven't really gone into detail about that. The second failed test was something that had been rumored for a while. I had been hearing about it for the last few weeks. I just couldn't nail it down exactly, even though my understanding was actually a test that was done under the WBC's clean boxing program back in the summer. But if there's now a second failed test that they're confirming, that just leads to more questioning. The one question I have, and I'd love to get an answer, but nobody seems to want to talk about it, is, they like to make a big deal about how Conor was doing UCOT testing also, and those tests came back negative. My question is, when you sign up for a program with VADA, there are different levels of testing you can do that cost more money the deeper you go into the testing. They can test for X number of banned substances, or they can rise the level to another number of banned substances, or even more banned substances. So to me, it's how many things you're testing for. So as an example, if they were testing at the highest level and testing, I mean, making up the number, 150 different substances, and he got caught with the clomid in one of them, and that was what triggered the positive test. My question is, how many substances was UCOT testing for? Are they testing for the same number of banned substances? Do they have a little bit of a lesser threshold for the types of things they're testing for? Obviously, if they were testing for fewer things because it's cheaper to test for fewer things, then there's the possibility that Conor did have no problem with the UCOT test because the stuff he was on, they weren't testing for. And that's a question that nobody wants to answer. And I'm not saying that UCOT is testing for fewer things, but they won't say what they're testing for specifically. So until we know that answer, him running around yelling, "We passed our UCOT test," and to me is meaningless, because you don't know what they were testing for in comparison to what VADA was testing for. As far as where we are now, all I know is that Conor Benn, whether he gave up the license because he just felt like he had to do it, or he knew it was going to be revoked from him because of this situation. Kind of, as I've used this analogy, it's like, "Oh, you're fired." "No, I quit." "Oh, I quit." "You're fired." I mean, okay, whatever. The bottom line is you don't have a license, and Conor Benn's not going to fight for a while. And by the way they're approaching this is one of the worst PR things I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I'll give them a little piece of free advice. When you're in a hole, stop digging.
I think that is one of the main messages that has come out of this. It seems, we have to give Eddie his grace in terms of coming out and doing multiple interviews. We love him for that. He gives us, as much time as we want, but there just seems to be a lot of tracking back and just circling and just all sort of nonsense coming out at the moment without actually giving us any clarity of where they're coming up with these pieces of information.
Oh, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think the best course of action right now from everybody on Conor Benn's team, from Eddie, from everybody, is just, pipe down, go through, look, it should be investigated. He should have a chance to talk to the commission and explain himself, and go from there. But it doesn't need to be every single minute in interviews in internet sites and on YouTube and that sort of stuff. I mean, again, I certainly appreciate the openness that they have, but it gets to a point where it's like, just be quiet for 5 minutes and let the investigation go forward, and try to keep your story straight.
Dan, finally, how does tonight end? Jake Paul and Anderson Silva.
That's a tough pick. I mean, I have my gambling show we do on YouTube every Friday where they make me pick the fights, and I went back and forth, but I did pick Anderson Silva to win. I took it on the money line because I could see him outboxing Jake like he did against Chavez, but we know he's a good striker, so it could be a knockout. I just picked Jake. I picked Anderson Silva on the money line, meaning he'll win the fight, whether it's a knockout or a decision. I didn't say, but I think that Silva gets the victory, and we'll see. I don't have a rooting interest in the fight. I hope it's a good fight, whatever happens. Like I said, there's a lot of boxing going on Saturday, and I'm interested in most of those fights, but this one is the one that I'm sort of most interested in for a lot of weird reasons.
I think that sums it up perfectly. Dan, again, thank you so much for your time. We will catch up again soon, but yeah, always appreciated on Boxing Social, mate, and please take it easy. And for the whole interview, I've been staring at that Ricky Hatton. Is that a Halloween mask? You're going to
that is people make a comment. Yeah, they see the videos I've done and they see that in the background. So I have behind me one of my desks in my office, and it has a push pin board behind it. And I have that Ricky Hatton Halloween mask. I don't know if it was Halloween, but it was something they were giving away years ago at some fight that I was covering. I don't know if you can see it, but next to Ricky is a similar mask of Manny Pacquiao.
Yes, I could just.
So they're next to each other.
Yeah, he's sort of just like he's falling over a little bit on his.
But it wasn't. But it wasn't where they gave out them at the May. at the Hatton versus Pacquiao fight. It wasn't like they were handing those out. I think I got them at totally separate fights. I just thought it was kind of funny, and so I tacked it up on the board in my office. And I honestly, when I first did a couple of YouTube interviews, I didn't realize that they were so prominent in the background. But I've seen some people comment, like they'll hit me up on Twitter and be like, "What's that Ricky Hatton thing doing there?" So I find it to be very amusing.
Yeah, I've been
Yeah. So
so,
yes, that is in fact Ricky Hatton on my desk behind me.
and we cannot wait for him to be back in action November 12th. I'm absolutely buzzing for that fight. That's going to be fantastic seeing
Oh,
one.
you're talking about the exhibition fight with Barrera?
Yeah, I mean, it's just going to be a fun night.
Yeah,
I'm just
it
looking
will be
forward to
fun.
that.
Listen, I'm going to watch that if it's. I mean, it's available here in the United States. I'm definitely going to check that out because, you know, I'm a huge Barrera fan forever. I love covering Ricky and watching Ricky's fights. I covered many of their fights through their careers. They're both great guys to deal with. I still see Barrera from time to time at other fights because he does a lot of television work on one of the Mexican television networks. So I see him at fights I go to, and we always have a nice word with each other. I mean, they're two great fighters.
Hmm.
I think Ricky Hatton maybe this year might be the opportunity for him to make it into the Hall of Fame. Barrera's already in the Hall of Fame, and we'll have to see the votes get counted up in the next couple of weeks. But they were both a joy to cover and a joy to watch.